go. Hello and welcome to the Quagmire. Today, we have a new host here. Say hello to Harry. Say hi, Harry.
Hello, my name is Harry. I'm the new co-host of the new sidekick host of the philosophy podcast.
And today, a recurring guest, Meg. Say hello.
Hi, I'm Meg. I'm part of the Philosophy Society and a third year student.
And today, in episode 4 of the Quagmire, we are going to discuss free will. So let's just like kick it off. Harry, what do you think of the concept of free will?
So, should we both give an opening statement or something? Because I think Meg's got
Yeah.
something prepared as well. So my view on free will would be that, I wouldn't answer yes or no, because I think that the whole question of free will is kind of a nonsense question that's created by a misunderstanding of what we are, like our nature. So I think that if we were to understand our nature properly, the question would just disappear. So that's my opening position. I mean, I can flesh that out a bit if you want.
First I'll get Meg's opening position, and then I'll ask you two to flesh it out. So, Meg, tell us your opening position.
So I kind of agree, but I personally think that free will is a man-made construct used to kind of manipulate and control us, in the sense that we have the illusion that we can do whatever we want and that we are free beings, so we are more morally abiding and more like civil in society.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so Harry, just both of you expand on your positions, starting with Harry.
Okay, so if you look around yourself, all that you can find is experience. So, for instance, if you look at your computer, that's an experience.
Yeah.
If you look up at the sky, look at your hands, look at a thought, or I mean, you can't look at a thought or a feeling, but you experience
Some people
it. Well, yeah, I guess. But I mean, everything that appears as an experience, and I mean, you can go wherever you want,
Yeah.
but you can't get away from experience. So if you went to the most remote corner of the universe, like if you stood on the surface of Mars, that would be an experience. If you got sucked into a black hole, that would be an experience. If you got murdered, that would be an experience. So everything that appears is an experience. So all experience appears and disappears. So if it appears and disappears, it has to appear in something and disappear from something. So what would that be? We would call that mind,
Yeah.
My mind. It appears in my mind and it leaves my mind. So the question is, what am I? Because I am not the body, because the body itself is an experience that appears and disappears. The body isn't always present, but I'm always present. For instance, when I fall asleep, the body disappears, but I remain present. So I'm not the body. I'm not any kind of objective thing like a thought or a feeling or a memory, because all of those things appear and disappear, but I myself am eternally present in my own experience. So really what I am is the mind in which everything appears. That would be my true nature. So when we could call that consciousness being the essence of mind, consciousness being, because mind is like the totality of your experience, but every experience is made of consciousness. Because, so for instance, if you take the hand, what do you know of the hand other than the sight of it, the smell of it, the touch of it? It's an experience, and that experience is made of consciousness. So all that you ever experience is this kind of field of consciousness. So, and that's your true self. Because what happens is, consciousness, in order to experience a finite world, consciousness has to contract itself into a finite perspective. Just like when you fall asleep at night, in order to experience a dream world, your dreaming mind has to contract into one particular perspective, from which perspective the finite world can appear in the dream. Yeah. So consciousness, infinite consciousness, which is all there is, in my view, contracts itself into a finite perspective in order to experience a finite world of cars and bodies and thoughts and feelings. And so what happens is, because it does that, it seems as if consciousness is being generated by this body. So for instance, if you had a dream and you fell asleep, you would dream your dream from the perspective of a character in that dream. So you would look down and you would have dream hands and dream feet. And when you shut your dream eyes, the dream world would disappear. Yeah. But so it would be a reasonable inference to think that the consciousness or the mind that's known in the dream world is somehow generated by the brain. But that wouldn't be the case, would it? Because the dream body in the dream is just appearing in the mind. The dream isn't appearing in the body of the dreamed character in the dream. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
All there is the dream in mind. And the dream character and the dream world appear in the dream. So what you are is the dream in mind, in which the world and the body and all other bodies and all things are appearing as experiences. So what you are is consciousness, and every experience that appears in whatever mind is appearing to you.
Question.
You know?
I've got
Yeah.
a question about this. What happens if someone gets into a coma, like a vegetative state? They have no mind, they have no consciousness. Are they, but yet they are not dead. They are still part of this world. Like someone like, let's say, Terry Hievo back in the day, he had a heart attack, got put in a vegetative state for, I don't know, it was like 14 years, I think. And yeah, like he was still a thing, but he had no consciousness. He had no conscious experience, yet he was still a being.
Yeah, but your that thing depends on the assumption that consciousness is generated by the brain, because you're saying that he was in a coma and so he had no conscious
Who's he?
experience. Oh, sorry, she had no conscious experience, because it's like assuming that consciousness is somehow generated by a brain. But what I'm saying is that reality itself is consciousness. So when so if someone went into a coma and was no longer responsive, what I would say is that that finite mind was no longer arising in consciousness. So, for instance, when you fall asleep, the finite mind relaxes and dissolves back into infinite consciousness. Infinite consciousness can't know the presence of the world without the finite mind. So the finite mind dissolves back into consciousness and the world disappears. But that doesn't mean that the body would disappear,
No.
because the body isn't generating consciousness. The body is just an image in consciousness.
Yeah.
So the body is like the reason why we all appear as bodies or as brains is because the brain is the second person point of view. So you have a certain set of first person experiences. When I look at you, your set of first person experiences appear to me as a body.
Yeah.
Because my mind is limited, my perspective is limited. So your first person experience appears to me from my limited point of view.
Yeah.
As a body. So the brain isn't generating consciousness. The brain is what consciousness looks like from my second person point of view.
Yeah.
On your first person experience. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So basically, in a way, rather than consciousness coming out of the brain, consciousness is going into the mind, and then we're perceiving that consciousness. Is that a way to?
No, consciousness isn't going into anything. There's just consciousness. That's all there is. Yeah. So it's not going into the mind. The mind is appearing in consciousness, like a dream appears in your dream, in your consciousness at night.
Yeah. I mean, I'd love to expand upon this further, but Meg, expand upon your position, because I don't want to leave you out of the conversation.
I was really enjoying listening to that.
I didn't even get to the free will bit there. I got a bit carried away.
Yeah.
I mean, I'll just do like the free will bits just very briefly. So if all there is this infinite consciousness, there's no division between internal and external. There's no self and world. So everything's just this ocean of consciousness. There's no free will because it's not split into parts. So that would be, that was where I was going anyway.
I mean, in a way, I guess the viewers will be infinitely conscious that you need to stick to the topic in a way, but I'm sorry, but yeah, Meg, carry on.
So yeah, I have a completely different view on free will. Basically, I think when we strip humanity and even nature down to the basics, everything is a product of cause and effect. One thing happens as a product of another thing being its cause. So I think free will, in its sense, is a very man-made construction, in the sense that we are so scared of not being free that we almost have to create this concept to be free, because we don't like the idea of being controlled by boundaries or by rules, or even just by nature itself. So we have this illusion of that we chose to do this thing, so therefore we had that choice. When in fact we didn't choose it. It was always going to happen, but from our conscious point of view, we made the decision for it to happen, therefore we must have free will. Whereas if we think about it really think about it, regardless of whether I thought, oh, I'm going to use the blue pen or the black pen today, like that was always a product of me being in a product, me being in the chain of like cause and effect, and me just simply carrying on in that chain of cause and effect. If that makes sense.
Yeah, like as in a way, I was about to say, couldn't you argue that because human nature is like changed by, according to at least the Marxist conception of human nature, it's changed. It's like controlled by material conditions. People's decisions are like influenced by the world, the material world they live in. Like, couldn't you argue that that provides a similar deterministic worldview?
Yeah, completely, of course. Like, whereas I'm kind of arguing more from a metaphysical sense of Big Bang, God, whichever you believe in, cause the first cause, and then everything then has been an infinite chain of cause and effect. Even the simple things of material, societal values, even your kind of upbringing has an impact that causes you to act in a certain way. Like, you were born, your parents have these morals, they implement their morals on you, and that causes your decision in the future. Like, you're not really making the decision. And even with materialism, like fashion industry, like you buy a magazine, you see that this is the latest fashion, that causes you to then like buy the clothes. Like, there is no real decision within that. It's all just subconscious desire to fit in and kind of do the norm, I guess.
I mean,
Yeah.
definitely like but how would your view how it contradict with that? Do you think your view of everything being like this conscious this metaphysical conscious world would conflict with that view or not?
Yeah, I would dispute the existence of cause and effect because, in my view, there's just consciousness, and there's no such thing as like entities or things. So, for instance, like I would say that cause and effect is an illusion that's created by like thought. So, for instance, like if you imagine that you are sitting in your front garden, and like at the front of your front garden, there's like a brick wall, and there's like a gap in the wall where the gate is. And imagine you're sitting in the garden, and a cat walks in front of the wall, on the outside of the wall, and
Okay.
you can't see it. And then what would happen is like the cat's nose would appear first because all you can see is the gap, in the wall. And so the cat's nose would appear first, then the head, then the shoulders, then the legs, then the tail, and it would disappear in the same order when it walked past the gate. You know what I mean? So cause and effect would be like saying that the head of the cat causes the shoulders, which cause the hind legs, which cause the tail. Whereas really that's an illusion because really it's all one cat. You see what I mean? But the mind breaks it down into parts and says, this part causes this part, causes this part. But really, it's not really split into parts. You see what I mean? So when you say one thing causes another thing, the boundary lines that you're drawing that are between things, I would say are illusory, like the line between the Pacific and Atlantic Ocean, or the line between the hand and the arm. It doesn't really exist, like these lines. So I would say that there isn't any such thing as one thing causing another thing to happen, because there's no such thing as things, because ultimately it's all just this pure consciousness,
Yeah.
in my view.
So basically, rather than like different events causing each other, it's more like a flowing, like a flowing river of events, like a flowing, just everything's like just in motion in a way.
Sure, it would be like if you had a dream that you were playing billiards and you dreamt that you were like playing pool and you hit the ball with the pool cue. Did that pool cue cause the ball to move?
You did with your
But wait, remember, it's
in the
all in a
dream.
dream. It's all a dream.
In the dream.
So did the pool cue cause the ball to move?
Your mind did, but in the dream world, then yeah, like that depends if this
Well,
world is dream.
all that's there is your mind, isn't it? That there is no pool ball, there is no pool cue. It's just you could say it's the movement of the mind. There's no thing which influences another thing. It's all just a movement. It's all just imaginary. It's all just your own mind dreaming of a pool cue, dreaming of a ball.
I mean, definitely could say that, but that depends on whether you think the real world is a dream or not. Because yeah, like if you don't think the real world is like dream, like then if you do that in real life, then the cause is the pool cue. But like,
I would argue that real life is a dream appearing in consciousness, so it would be exactly the same. Like there isn't really a pool ball, a pool cue, a pool table. it's all just a movement of mind. So there's no cause and effect because it's all just an appearance in mind. There's not one thing affecting another thing. All that's present is your own mind. You know what I mean?
But I've got a question now. Like, you know how we can get lucid dreams where we can have complete control over our existence, like just complete control over our dream world.
Yeah.
Could people try to do that with this world then? Like, or not? Like, do you not think it's possible?
Well, what would control what? Because all there is consciousness. So it would be like consciousness can't control consciousness because it would be like trying to catch your right hand with your right hand. You know, it doesn't really make any sense. You know what I mean? In order to control something, you have to stand apart from it to control it. You know what I mean? Like, so I can control a ball or whatever.
Yeah.
But reality can't control reality. And ultimately what you are is reality. So in order to control things, you have to invent an abstract self called Harry Thompson or whatever that controls what, you know, functioning of whatever. But that abstract self is ultimately an illusion, you know.
Yeah. But I was about to say it could be also conducive to argue that with your worldview that there may be one big consciousness, but there's also many little consciousnesses. So like Alan Marsh, Harry Thompson, Meg Risley, they're all different little consciousnesses.
In order to say that, you would have to find some other consciousness, because like from your point of view, there's just your consciousness, isn't there? You can't find any outer edge to it.
Well, someone there's actually a great concept within, like, you know, Buddhist within Buddhism, like Tibetan Buddhism, called a tulpa. Now what a tulpa is it's where people, after trying, it may take weeks, months, even years, they create like a complete separate consciousness inside their body. Like this consciousness, a lot of the time, it's completely autonomous as well. So let's say I'm Aaron Marsh in my body. Aaron Marsh is the only consciousness. I could create a tulpa, let's say, called Harry Thompson, which acts completely like you or whatever. I don't know. I could just it's kind of like not even just voices in your head, but even more so. Like it's it's kind of like its own sentient consciousness within your body. Could you not argue that the fact that one can create such a consciousness shows that there are different consciousnesses?
No, I think that we're using the word consciousness in two different ways, because I think it sounds to me like you mean like personality. Like I understand that you could have two different personalities in one body, like split personality. But when I say consciousness, I mean like the knowing of experience. I'm not sure, because in order to have two consciousnesses, you would have to like, it's as ridiculous as saying that you could put like the taste of chocolate in a jar or something. Like, how could you divide one consciousness from another? It wouldn't make any sense. Like, how could you, in order to validate the idea that there could be another consciousness, you would actually have to find another consciousness. But what would it mean, another consciousness? Because in order to differentiate one consciousness from another one, there would have to be objects. They would have to have different objective qualities, but then there wouldn't be consciousness, because consciousness is the subjective experience of being aware. It doesn't have any objective qualities, which it would need to differentiate itself from another consciousness. You know what I mean?
I get what you're saying. Like, any thoughts on this, Meg, or not? Any thoughts on?
Yeah, I mean, I understand what you're trying to say, and I get it. I think. I just don't really understand how you can just think that all there is consciousness. Like, I mean, I get that you think that everything's just consciousness and like everything is a mode of said consciousness, but I don't understand how that can really be effective reality.
Well, isn't that your experience? Do you experience anything other than consciousness?
No, that is very true. But I don't, maybe it's just me being me and not liking the idea of all there being is consciousness, because I feel like I need such a bigger explanation than all there being is possible consciousness, and that reality isn't actually reality, it's just a product of consciousness. I don't really like that.
Well, I'm not saying that your life is...
Yeah, I understand what you're trying to say.
Like,
I know. No, you're not.
Yeah. Like the human world is still real. It's just made of consciousness, you know, not made out of physical matter.
Yeah, I don't understand how you explain many kind of phenomena like science and cause and effect and all this if everything's just consciousness. But like, yeah, I mean, maybe I just need to do a bit more research and then I probably would understand it.
I mean, I'm not trying to invalidate the laws of science. I'm just because the laws of science and relativity and quantum mechanics, it's all valid. But I'm just saying that it's laws of mind, laws of consciousness instead of laws of matter. You know, it's not laws that govern or regulate the physical universe. It's the laws of how mind unfolds in consciousness. And like,
yeah, no, I completely understand what you're trying to say. I'm just more of a laws of matter and laws of science kind of person than like the laws of mind. But equally valid. Like I understand your point and I kind of like the idea of it, but at the same time, I'm not entirely sure if I completely understand it quite yet. And that's my problem.
just seems to me the most like parsimonious theory, because in order to say that there's like a world of physical matter, you have to make a hell of an assumption, because you have to say that outside of consciousness, which nobody's ever gone outside of consciousness, because anything that you experience is by definition inside consciousness. So you have to say that outside of consciousness, wherever that is, where nobody's gone, there's this entire world of physical matter, like a shadow universe that exists that nobody's ever experienced before. It just seems like an enormous assumption, which doesn't actually, it would be all right if we needed that to explain our experience. Like if it was necessary to posit that world to explain our experience, that would be one thing. But we don't even need to do that. You know, it's not necessary to explain anything, to make reference to this giant world that nobody's ever experienced. And not only do they say that there's a giant world that we've never experienced outside of consciousness, but then they say that consciousness, which is the only thing that we do experience, is somehow generated by that world that nobody's ever experienced before. You know, it's completely nuts. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, when you speak about it, it's complete nonsense. I think I just like the idea of there being something more than what I'm aware of, and that like we could possibly get outside of ourselves and see what is out there.
I'm curious
Obviously,
now.
it's possible.
It's okay if I interject.
Okay.
Okay, so how about multiverse theory? Like there's a theory that this may be one universe, one consciousness, but there's a theory that there's separate multiverses, maybe even with like separate laws of physics, separate ways they are, designed. So
But where does the
what are you saying, Harry?
sorry, no, carry on. I think I interrupted you there.
No, but okay, so basically multiverse theory. So that means hypothetically there could be something outside of this consciousness. There could be something outside of our consciousness. There could even be another consciousness. There could even be, it may not be consciousness. It may be just matter, and it may operate under completely different laws other than our mind, our consciousness operate under.
Well, where does the universe appear?
In our experiences.
Yeah, it appears as an experience in consciousness. Now, if you like got some kind of spaceship that could take you to another universe, you got out of the spaceship and looked around, where would that other universe appear?
In our mind, our consciousness.
Yeah, in consciousness. You know, I mean, like you said another thing that you said, like, well, maybe there could be matter outside of consciousness. Maybe there could be something else outside of consciousness. But until we get some evidence for that, you know what I mean? There's no point really even talking about it, because if I have to entertain all possible hypotheses that I have no evidence for, I've got to believe that there's a giant man crouching behind the moon. You know, I have no evidence for that, but you know what I mean? Like, you know what I mean? If I'm believing that there's something outside of consciousness, even though I don't have any evidence for that, maybe I've got to believe that there's a civilization of tiny little people living inside my carpet, or that there's a little, you know what I mean? Like,
I know, yeah.
I can't give credence to theories that there's no.
Like Russell's teapot. Like Russell's teapot in a way.
Sure, yeah.
Yeah, like I was about to say, it's kind of like a golden hammer in a way. Like anything you can just say, oh, that's consciousness. Oh, that's consciousness. But I've got a question. Can you falsify that theory? Because according to Karl Popper's falsification principle, something either it can be falsified, or it's like an analytic, or it's like an a priori like truth. Correct me if I'm wrong on the falsification principle, but something can only really be true knowledge or like legitimate if it's either an a priori analytic truth or if it's falsifiable.
So what is the position that are you asking us to falsify?
Your position,
That all there is consciousness?
you can't really falsify it,
No.
therefore, like, it's not
can't-
really.
Wait a minute, because I can't falsify it, that's true.
Mhm.
But I think that only applies to like statements of logic, like, because when I say that all there is consciousness, I'm not talking like abstract philosophy. I'm making reference to your direct experience. Like if I ask you, are you aware? What would your answer be?
Yeah, I'm aware.
It's not, you don't have to work it out logically. It's your direct experience that consciousness exists, and it's your direct experience that you can't find anything other than consciousness. So whether I can falsify it, I mean, I'm not even sure how I could possibly falsify it. Like, it's not like I can put consciousness in a test tube or whatever and do experiments on it, but it's your direct experience that consciousness exists and that it's all that there is. So I'm not sure that that really applies, that principle of falsification.
I was about to say that, like, because what Karl Popper did was he compared, I think it was Einstein's theory of relativity and like religion. Like religion can't really be, and Christianity. He said that he concluded that Einstein's theory was more legitimate because Einstein's theory could be falsified hypothetically, but it wasn't. Like, surely a theory that can be falsified but isn't is more legitimate than one that can't be falsified.
I agree in that case, because both Einstein's theory and the theory that there's a Christian God are both kind of theories. Like, nobody's seen God, it's just a theory. So the fact that you can't falsify the God hypothesis does count against it. But when I'm talking about consciousness and stuff, it's your direct I'm talking about your direct experience. It's not really like something that I'm just pulling out of thin air. You know what I mean?
No. Yeah, I know what you
If I
mean.
was saying that the moon was made of cheese or something, or that there's a little teapot in space, that, you know, it applies for that Russell's teapot, because that the fact that you can't falsify that counts against it. But I'm talking about your direct experience, you know.
I know what you
I
mean.
agree with Aaron. I agree, because you can't falsify experience, can you? So
No.
you can't falsify consciousness.
Yeah. Actually, looking at it, I was just trying to like provide arguments because I actually agree with you, but I'm just trying to, like, provide like concept which may challenge the view. Like, even the falsification principle itself isn't necessarily like, a strong philosophical position, as you can't actually falsify that. You can't falsify the falsification principle itself. So,
It's interesting though.
but I was about to say, back to free will, and also back to Tulpas and stuff. Surely the fact that you can, because I first used them to, maybe contrast with Harry's argument, but if we apply them to free will, surely the fact that you can create another consciousness that acts completely freely shows that there is an element of free will, and you can create that in your mind.
When you say another consciousness, that really confuses me. Like, when you say that you can create another consciousness, because when I say consciousness, I mean like the knowing of experience. I don't see how you could have another one.
I mean, like another mind in this case. What I mean is like another mind.
That makes sense, because a mind is like a set of experiences. So you could have another mind, but I don't see how you could have another consciousness, because that would mean that consciousness was some kind of object.
Yeah, but yeah, the Tulpas like another mind though. Like, maybe I just use the term consciousness and mind like interchangeably, but in that case, but do you guys think that the existence of Tulpas makes free will, like, real? Or
Well, I mean, your mind and my mind are two separate minds, two different sets of experiences, and but both of those minds appear in and on and by the same consciousness. So I don't see why you couldn't have another mind. Like, for instance, split personalities. Like, I think that there's reports of split personalities where, when people with split personalities dream, each split personality experiences the dream from a different perspective. So there's like different minds. You know, they're not just like pretending. It's like they seriously have different minds in their bodies. So if my mind and your mind are separate and exist simultaneously, I don't see why you couldn't have multiple minds that
yeah,
associate with the same body. Not that there's any difference between mind and body. That's just a way of talking.
I think because I think that makes it so that free will is possible because the fact that there can be these multiple minds with all these like impressions like acting freely, like even if there is cause and effect, even if they are influenced by material conditions, they all have different personalities. They all act different because of it. Like even if there's some swaying to the decision, it's still their decision they can make. I see you shaking your head there, Meg.
No, I really don't agree with this.
Okay, carry on.
I don't know. I don't understand how you can say that they've been influenced by something, but they still have a decision to make. The very definition of influence means that it makes a decision for you, and that has an impression on your mind for the decision that comes out of it. So by its very nature, it cannot be a product of free will.
Then again,
because sorry, carry on.
But I say if we had no influence, surely we need influence to have free will, though, because if we didn't have influence, then we literally couldn't make decisions.
Yeah, but if you don't, but if you even if you have influence or not, like you still can't. Like I'm not saying that you can't make a decision because clearly we can make a decision. But what I'm saying is it's all reality is like a big illusion of making decisions. Like you may think that you are making that said decision by being like, oh, I like that dress on that like mannequin, so I'm gonna buy it, whatever.
Yeah.
But it's all just one big like illusion in a mass chain of cause and effect. We are modes of one, like technically pantheism, but technically not. Like we are all modes of one big substance, whether you believe it's God, the universe, whatever. One thing set off this infinite cause and effect. And like we are all modes of this substance acting in a way to continue the chain.
Yeah,
it just goes on. And no matter what society brings us, that fundamental basis still exists. So whilst that fundamental basis still exists, regardless of influence, regardless of different changing of societal values, cultural values, you cannot have free will in that and have an infinite of cause and effect at the same time.
I think I'd like to ask, what do you mean when you say us and you're talking about us and you said that we're all modes of something? Could you just specify what you mean by us? Because I'm not sure that I'm clear on that.
I just mean in the sense of us as people, like each individual person.
Like bodies?
Yeah. Or I guess you could argue it as consciousness, but it'd be a bit difficult. But like in the sense that I believe of me as this person in a soul, as a body, as a very physical being, we are all part of one massive chain which just keeps the universe going and going and going.
When you say that we're part of, so how do you draw the distinction between the body and the world?
Yeah.
So, for instance, like when I breathe in air, the air goes from the world and becomes part of the body. So where do you draw the boundary line? Like, so for instance, when a particle of air is out here, it's the world. And then when it passes the lips, does it become part of the body? Like, or for instance, if I inject something into my arm, at what point does it become part of the body and cease being part of the world?
Yes, when it enters the cellular structure. So let's say with air, when it enters, when it goes into the cells, that could be when it becomes part of the body rather than the world.
Let's be specific though. So you're saying that, like, imagine that there's a cell with a cell wall, and then there's a particle of oxygen. So when it's outside the cell wall, it's part of the world, and then it goes in, and then at a certain point, it changes to becoming part of the body. So what's that specific point? When it passes the membrane of the cell? So what happens to the oxygen that changes it from being part of the world to part of the body?
Imagine it's it's not necessarily like different, but I guess the oxygen gets absorbed into the cells. So let's say I walk from one room into another. Let's say one room's the world and the other room's the body. Like I'm still me, but I'm just part of the other room now.
Yeah, but do you see what my point is? Is that the line between the body and the world is totally abstract. You know what I mean? It's like I don't see where you can draw the line.
I guess you could theoretically draw it when something gets absorbed into the body, not when something necessarily like inside you. Because let's say I accidentally swallow something and it hasn't been like digested, that's still part of the world. It's not because none of its components have been broken down yet. Let's say I eat something, my stomach digests it. The parts of the food that get digested are now part of the body, and now like the stuff that isn't like digested, it's kind of part of the world. You could argue.
I guess it just seems to me like you're talking like I'm walking across the countryside, I'm in France, and then I cross the border and I'm in Germany. But I haven't really crossed the border because the border is just an imaginary line. So when you're saying like that it ceases to be part of the world, if you eat some food and it's part of the world and then it goes down your esophagus and then you draw a certain abstract line, maybe at the border of the stomach or the border of the intestines and say, that's where the food becomes part of the body and stops being part of the world. But it just seems totally abstract, like the line between France and Germany.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying, and I do get that it probably does seem quite abstract. But I haven't really considered, which is probably quite bad for a philosophy student, but I haven't really considered more to the point of whether like how we distinguish from the world. Like I haven't considered that. I just considered myself as like an individual living on Earth with all these like things around me, and like I haven't like just basically how any non-philosophical person would view the world. I live in a house. This house is in England. This England is part of the world. Like I don't see it all as one big substance. I don't think. I haven't considered it as one big substance just yet, but I'm saying that like within like the laws of nature, we are a product. I'm kind of making this up now because I haven't really thought this through. But within the laws of nature, we are just one byproduct of a deterministic causal universe. But yeah, I understand that that there kind of does need to be a line.
It seems to me that if you are the body, then you are the world because you can't draw the line. So for instance, like half of your lung is hanging on the trees. You know what I mean? Like you can't have a body in the absence of a world because it's not two systems. Like because the reason why we think that it's two different systems is because of like Christianity and stuff, and like the cultural heritage that says that God created human beings and human beings are the guardians of the world. But if you actually look at the science, you can't distinguish between the system that is the body and the system that is the world. They're not two systems. It's all one system. You know what I mean? We're talking material here. We're talking about materialism. We haven't mentioned consciousness yet. But even from a materialistic point of view, you can't draw lines between the body and the earth and the sun. It's all one giant system.
I was about to say, that actually explains a lot of stuff like thermodynamics, like the cause and effect, like and also like the fact that the universe doesn't gain or lose energy. That's that theory actually kind of it may seem very abstract and stuff. It's actually very scientific when you actually look at it.
That's an interesting point. I didn't think about the energy loss thing.
Yeah. So in a way, it kind of has to be.
Yeah, I see what you mean.
I'm really digging this new position of yours. I'm really digging it.
I'm going to have to say that I'm going to have to agree. Like, I do think we are all just one.
I
think, like, even if it's just materialism, everything has to be one. There can't be a distinction, can there really?
No.
No, I have to agree. Yeah, I see where you're coming from.
But the reason why you identify with the body alone is because you've been taught to do that by the culture.
Yeah. Yeah, because if you think about it, from a non-philosophical point of view, we are taught we are a being on Earth as this physical presence. We interact with other things. Everything is a solid. But in reality, everything is just one continual substance.
Yeah.
Isn't much of a distinction.
I mean, the other thing seems like a pretty solid position, but it's not at the end of the day.
No.
So how would that impact your view on free will, Meg?
I know. We might have to revise this.
Well, that's what philosophers do. They change up like their opinions. That's what the good philosophers do.
I think I still stand by the point that there is no such thing as free will, because it just can't be, like physically can't be. And from a And even if we are all just one substance, that again proves that free will can't be a thing.
Yeah.
I mean, I have a point to make that furthers on from that, because obviously, like, we're talking about material now, and we're saying that it's all one materialistic system. But I mean, I would take it a step further, and I would say that the material, that it's all one substance, is consciousness. Yeah. But see, the thing is, like, we all feel free. You know what I mean? We all feel as if we have free will. And when people come along and make arguments saying that there's no free will, it doesn't agree with our experience. You know what I mean? You have to.
I know completely what you mean.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So why do I have this experience that we're free? Well, the reason why I would say that it is because, like, if we use the metaphor of a dream again, imagine that you have a dream, and that when you have a dream, you dream the dream from the point of view of a character in that dream. Now, that dream character doesn't have free will, because there's no such thing as that separate dream character, because the dream character and the dream world arise simultaneously as one. You know what I mean? There's no little separate character moving around doing its own thing and making free choices. But the mind itself that's having the dream is itself inherently free. You know what I mean? So the freedom that you feel inherently, you feel free, but that freedom doesn't belong to a little separate human being, because there's no little separate human being. The freedom that you feel belongs to what you really are, which is infinite consciousness, which is totally free to have whatever experience it wants, just like your dreaming mind at night is totally free to have whatever dream it wants. You see what I mean?
I was about to say though, in a way to like the streaming mind, it can be affected by real world things. So let's say when I was younger, when I fell out of the bed, I used to always have a dream where I fell off a mountain in a way. I don't know if you guys had the same dream, but yeah, I fell off a mountain and then I'd wake up on the floor, like just off, not lying in bed. So in a way, couldn't you argue that the physical world does influence the dream world then?
Well, I mean, I was just using the dream as a metaphor. I mean,
No, no, yeah,
the real world events do influence your dreams, but I was just using the dream as a
yeah,
metaphor for how consciousness behaves, because
uh-huh.
nothing can influence consciousness because there's nothing other than consciousness to influence it, you know?
Mhm.
So just like we have a dream at night and experience that dream from a limited perspective, metaphorically, consciousness can only experience the finite world from our limited human perspective and the perspective of other, minds.
Yeah.
I still stand by my illusion of free will perspective, in the sense that, like, if we're all still one substance, we still have to be modes of that substance. In the sense that, like, one big substance, like even like thought and feeling and stuff, is a mode of a substance. Like, we exist as like part of the substance, but a mode of it, in the sense that, like, that probably makes us feel free, because we still have this awareness, like this consciousness, this experience, that we are living, breathing, working, decision-making beings. But obviously this is all one massive illusion, because if you are part of one substance, there is no way to get out of this chain, and there is no way to be broken from this substance, so you cannot be free. Does that make sense?
Um,
I'm not sure what you mean by a mode. What do you mean by a mode?
So, like, I'm trying to think of, like, so, like, if you say, like, the mind is like a finite mode of, like, the absolute, like, attribute of thought. So, like, to take a pantheistic view, God is the substance, we are all modes. So, like, your mind is a finite mode of his attribute of thought. So you are all product of this one substance, but individuals in the same way, if that makes sense.
Okay, yeah, I suppose.
yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I was about to say, that's kind of like, surely if we, say that, because we're part of this mode, we can't. Would that mean that, we don't have free will if we can't do anything, like everything? Like, would you say that, people who can't do absolutely everything don't have free will then?
People that don't have everything can't do free will. Is that your question?
People that can't do everything, like can't do absolutely everything.
Don't have free will.
So let's say I can't shoot lasers out of my eyes. I don't have super strength. Does that mean I don't have free will? Because I can't do the things that those powers would otherwise
no,
not be able
okay.
to do?
Well, I guess you don't, clearly, because otherwise, if you had free will, you'd be able to do it. But that was quite, I feel like that's a very extreme point
Hmm.
to make in the grand scheme of things of what I was trying to say.
Yeah.
But no, I guess the answer would be no, you can't have free will if you can't do everything. But then what is everything in the first instance?
Everything. Like just everything that, I mean, you can't really define everything. Everything just defines itself,
Everything.
really. 'Cause
Yeah.
to define it by any other means would be confining it and then making it not everything.
Well, I guess then it's impossible to know
Hmm.
what everything is. So how could you know if you could do everything or not?
I guess if you had omniscience, but
But we don't.
no.
And that's getting into a different argument. I am not God.
So only God can have free will in a way.
I guess. Yeah, I would argue that, definitely.
Mhm.
If you're going to take that point of view, I would argue then that God is the first, like, if you're going to go like that, I would then be like, God is the first cause, very like Thomas Aquinas says. He is the first cause, he is the product of the world, and everything from his creation is now a chain of cause and effect once more. But he has to have this as a necessary being. He has to have all these attributes that we don't have in order to start the world off in the first place. But once again, if he is this first cause, we are all modes of his creation, and we are only going to do what he's decided for us to do. So then again, no free will.
I mean, I really want to get into this discussion, but I just realised it's veering completely off the topic of free will because I realised I could get into a God discussion. Like,
It's
I love
interesting
that
then.
discussion. Yeah, it's
Yeah,
interesting.
well, that's what my dissertation's on, so I'm like really informed on it now.
Oh, nice. Maybe we can do another religion podcast.
Absolutely.
As,
And
yeah. But I was about to say, how do you feel about this, Harry? Tell me your thoughts about this.
Well, it does seem like you're going back to Meg. Yeah, it does seem like you're going back to the when you're talking about yourself, like a little separate thing again. You know what I mean? Like when you were talking, when you said us and stuff, and it does seem like you were talking about a little separate self again that like exists that as its own little entity, I guess. But I mean, it is hard to like talk because I'm not sure. It is hard to talk about like the totality of things because like the English language isn't really designed to do that. You know, it's
yeah,
like you can't really approach it with English. I mean, what would you even say? You know, like the totality, but you can't do anything because the totality doesn't do anything like in itself.
yeah.
Whatever. It's hard to like speak about it.
No, yeah, I agree. Like, I'm not trying to talk about us as separate entities. It's just the way I'm using language flippantly. I don't mean to say us in like a very non-totalitic sense. I just mean like one thing. Again, yeah, it's just the way I use my language probably wasn't the best then.
Yeah, like with your view of like free will being based around the fact that everything is experience, everything is surely there are things that aren't experienced.
Where would those things be?
Let's say let's say for example, I create a room, lots of flammable objects. I light a lighter, I throw the lighter into that room, close the door, and then the room erupts into flames when I open the door like 20 minutes later. Surely the process to make that happen existed. Like literally no one experiences it. It's like a hypothetical just room, no windows, just no one even can enter it. So nothing can experience it. Surely, um, even though the process isn't experienced, isn't necessarily part of our consciousness, it's it still happens, you know? There still is a process.
Yeah, but you're still assuming that there's like a physical room that exists outside consciousness that we experience. Like I would say that like there isn't any such thing as like physical matter. What physical matter is what your mind looks like from a limited point of view within that mind. So for instance, like when you have a dream, you seem to experience a world, but that world is just what your own mind looks like from a point of view of the character in the dream.
Mhm.
You know what I mean? So it's not that there's a physical room that you set ablaze and that burns that you're aware of. Like all there is awareness, because if you went up to that room and looked at it, all you would find is an appearance and awareness. If you held your hand over the fire, all you would find is the experience of the heat. And you're saying, well, what happens to it when I don't look at it? But again, your mind is like a contracted, limited set of experiences that appears within like a larger mind. So really, you could say that like everything that appears is made of consciousness. I mean, that wouldn't really be fully accurate because you're still giving credence to the idea that there's something other than consciousness, but it's like, yeah, it's like a dream. Like the substance of everything is consciousness or awareness.
Yeah. So,
but I'm not saying that all there is your finite mind, so that when something leaves your finite mind, it no longer exists, because it's like all there is mind, and your mind is like a certain snapshot of experience within that larger mind, you know.
But what I mean is like no one's perceiving it. There's no mind that perceives this hypothetical room.
No, but the fire in the room is itself mind.
Okay, so you're saying everything has mind?
No. I'm not saying that there's a physical room which is aware. I'm saying that the room itself is awareness. Like that there isn't any room there. There's just awareness. Like the reason why it appears as a room is because you're looking at it from the limited perspective of a human mind. And so from the limited perspective of a human mind, pure consciousness, pure mind, appears to itself as a room. You know what I mean? So it isn't that a room is there or that a fire is there that has consciousness or is consciousness. It's that the fire itself is consciousness. You know what I mean? But it appears as a physical object because of the limitations of your mind looking at it.
Yeah, like on that note, I'm conscious that I have stuff to do today. Like, so then we have to wrap it up.
I feel like we could talk about this forever, couldn't we?
Yeah, that's what I mean. Like, I just I feel like I have to cut it off at one point because I don't want to make, maybe in the future, but I don't want to make a 3-hour podcast where we're just
Joe Rogan style.
Yes, yeah, like
exactly.
I mean, I might like to do it, but I just realize I have shit to do. So
don't we all, Aaron?
don't we all? I think it's been great hosting you, Meg. It's been great doing a podcast, Harry. Thank you for
having me.
Thank you for coming on. And peace out.
See you later.
Bye.
Bye.